But just before we start, I want you both to introduce yourselves, and by way of introduction, give them context for why you are sitting in front of them talking about failing forward. Yomi, let's start with you. Yeah, just move.
All right. Okay. My name is Yomi Adedeji. I'm the founder of Softcom and the co-CEO of Eyowo. I think I'm here because I've had my fair share of challenges recently. We had a license revoked by the central bank, and looking forward to sharing our experience with everyone and hoping that someone can learn something from it. I'm also looking forward to obviously learning from David, Peter, and everyone in the room. It's nice to see everyone, and I look forward to the discussion. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Peter.
Yeah. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Peter Njonjo, and I used to live in Lagos.
Peter.
So it's great to... Oh, sorry, let me just... Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. So, I used to live in Lagos, so it's great to be back home. And from a career standpoint, I worked with Coca-Cola for 21 years. And at some point, I started a company by the name of Twiga Foods, which is why I wanted to share with you my journey, getting up until this point. And right now, I'm running a business by the name of Selu, and we're focused on large-scale commercial farming. And I'll share with you a little bit in terms of our journey with Twiga, what we learned, and how that has helped us today. So great to be here.
Thank you very much. And Peter, I want to start with you. So, a few people might not know, you started a company, you co-founded a company, and then you had to leave for some reasons. And for many people, that could be considered the end of the world. I started a company, and then I had to leave for different reasons. But for you, it's giving you some perspective, and then you've gone on to start your own, another organization. So just talk to us a little bit about the experience that you had, the challenges that you faced with Twiga, some of the circumstances around your exit, because, some people read these things in the news, you experienced it. So talk to us about that.
No, thank you so much, David. So, Twiga, for those of you who might not have known about or do not know about the business, we're a B2B e-commerce business. So the challenge that we're trying to fix in the market was around the inefficiency of retail. And because this is something that constitutes a significant part of the economy, this is a sector that doesn't have a lot of infrastructure. So it involves both solving the infrastructure challenge while solving the challenge around how food moves from farmers to retailers. As a sector, it's a sector that raised a lot of capital. In Kenya, between 2017 and 2022, as an industry, we raised about $600 million. So it is a sector that drew in a lot of capital because of the opportunity it presented. So when I was pushing on with Twiga, we were in the middle of our Series D. As I mentioned, we need to raise a lot of capital. And this Series D happened right at the time that the US Federal Reserve increased their interest rates in March of 2022. I don't know whether many of you remember that. For some of us who are in the industry, it was a watershed moment. It was a watershed moment because between 2017 and 2022, there was a lot of capital that was available for some of these sectors because three things were happening in the world. One is that we had very low interest rates. Second, there was very low growth rates in the world. And the third, inflation was very low. And that meant that there was little opportunities in the developed markets to invest or deploy capital. So that money started making its way to riskier markets like Africa. And that's how we managed to attract that amount of funding. But when the US increased their interest rates, all of a sudden, this money was wiped out. So from a market that was awash with cash for entrepreneurs, it changed to a market that did not have the resources anymore. And that transition meant that we had to look at the business and ask ourselves, what are we going to do different to ensure that we can survive? Now, but this change not only impacted entrepreneurs, it also impacted the investors. So you can imagine now you're going back to your IC and there's been issues around maybe down rounds or devaluation of some of the assets that you've invested in. And there's a lot of disillusion that's also happening in the investor base. And that disillusion then brought a lot of dissonance into the business. So when I sat down in Trigger, so I used to have a very aligned shareholder base. And what you have now, the shareholder base starts pulling in different directions, because each shareholder now is facing different circumstances because of the changes that we're seeing in the market. While at the same time, fundraising then gets tougher and tougher and tougher. And during that period, it meant that we needed to start looking at non-traditional opportunities. In the case of Trigger, we had to start looking at things like farming. How do you backward integrate and expand your margins? But now you can imagine talking to a venture capitalist about farming. You know, that's like building a skyscraper with an overdraft. If you just look at the tenure that you require in terms of a return for a venture capitalist vis-a-vis the type of business that you're building. And now this conflict more or less started happening at a shareholder and a director level. And there was an opportunity that came up for the business, and sadly the Trigger shareholders moved away from primary agriculture. And it's something that I felt I was really passionate about, and I decided to go ahead and invest in the opportunity directly, and which is what is Selu today. But during that journey, that dissonance continued, and it got to a point where it was very, very dysfunctional in terms of how everyone was pulling in different directions. And it got to a point where I had to make a call. Do I have to then step back and maybe let some of the shareholders pursue this opportunity forward, while I then pursue the real thing that I feel that would have an impact, which was around large-scale commercial farming. So I would say that when you're raising money from shareholders, there's all the dynamics that come with what a shareholder's DNA is. And you realize who exactly your shareholders are during tough times. And that's when you realize that there's a lot of people who are very short-term, there's a lot of people who are long-term, and when you're having a collection of all these individuals, sometimes it can be very difficult as you're trying to transition a business. So that's when I made the call to leave a business, and actually moving out of something that you founded is quite tough. It's grief. So you go through all the stages of grief as you then dissociate or distance yourself from the business.
So I want to talk a little bit about the mental impact that had on you. But I want to ask Yomi first. For a few people here do not know that apart from the challenges you faced with Eyowo, you also had your beach not too far from here demolished because the federal government decided they want to build a coastal highway. You've had those two experiences in the space of, a year or so? How has that impacted you mentally? What are some of the lessons that you've learned from that? And I want to ask you this personally. Why do you still believe in this market despite everything you faced?
Okay, I think I'm going to start from perhaps like the last question. Why do I believe in this market? I think the upsides of this market are really great. I think that we're in literally a land of opportunity. There's barely a scratch on a couple of things. I think in the earlier conversation, I was hearing someone speak about non-consumers. So we're in a market where the median age is about 18.6 years old. We're bound to grow to about 400 million people by 2050, in 26 years' time. You're going to have a population of about, almost 50% of them are going to be 22 years old. So I think we're just primarily just getting started. And if we're operating in the digital space, what that also means is that, I mean, in 25 years' time, you can imagine the level of digital penetration that will have happened. So I'm here for like literally the long run, and perhaps these are just like early days of it. Mental health, and in terms of like what toll do you take on me, I think it was quite a really tough time, especially because of the level of uncertainty that came with just like, waking up in the morning and all of a sudden you hear that your license has been taken away from you from the news. It's not like you got a letter from the central bank. You just wake up in the morning and you're trying to go to work and, just preparing for the day, you realize that, you have no license any longer.
They need to inform you directly.
I was literally going through my phone in the morning and I learned that our license has been taken away from us. So there was no formal notification that said, tomorrow morning we're going to make an announcement. And that generally obviously kicked off a lot of panic. panic from customers. I mean, people had money in the bank. By the way, for anyone who didn't know, Eyowo was a digital bank, or is a digital bank, as the case is. And you wake up in the morning, it's almost like you're on this 6-hour flight, you're about to land, and you just heard, oh, there's turbulence, and there's some voice coming up from the public address system saying like, we've just lost an engine. And literally the next thing you're waiting for is, okay, Mayday, and let everybody just, I guess, go home. So it was very tough, and it was very challenging. And it took, I'd say it took quite some toll on me, I think perhaps initially. However, it didn't take time for there to be like a shift in perspective, because I didn't even have the time to, I would say, mull over what has just happened. The phones have started ringing, people need their money. There are hundreds of thousands of customers whose money have been stuck in the bank. We didn't know beforehand, so there was literally no response plan, at the time this was happening. However, I mean, in terms of like lessons learned from just going through that, just to get right to the point, I think it basically gave a real new meaning to resilience for me as a person. You think about resilience as, you can go through difficulty, you can overcome challenges, and I've been an entrepreneur all of my life. I've never worked anywhere. I've done this for about maybe 17 years. So I've seen things. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I can go through things, right? But when you're going through what you don't understand, is a different type of ball game, and you pretty much want to stay very adaptable. You're not particularly clear on, so you're thinking about why me, why us, why now? Why don't you guys just wait for maybe a month? I don't know, just before this happens. But the mental shift is mostly to pretty much get into what now. I mean, there's no more time for why me, why us, and why now. Just what now? What do we do now? And adaptability and a lesson from resilience at this time would be just really thinking through, what do I do now? And realizing that as you do is how you get informed. So you act, you get informed. From the information you get, you take new action, you get informed again. When you don't know where you're going, you pretty much figure out the path on the way. So it was quite a lesson about why it's important to stay adaptable. The second important point would be transparency and communication, really. And this was very difficult. I think it's very easy to look back and just say it's transparency and communication. It's a very difficult thing because you're attempting to communicate what you don't know. You don't know how people are going to get their money back. You have no immediate answers to that. The NDIC, which by regulation takes almost immediate action. And this also gave me an incline into how banks felt about digital banks. It took about 24 minutes for 27 banks to pretty much decommission Eyowo. I'm like, wow, I'm reading the news, I check my phone, is it working? It's working. I check it again in 24 minutes, nothing is working again. So I think there was just the entire rush off as the case is. But I'll say transparency, meeting our customers, letting them know the things we know. We're sure about these things. We know that if you've taken our license, that's all we know right now. We don't know how you're going to get your money. We don't know exactly how this will look like. But please be rest assured that we're not going anywhere. We're going to make sure that we address this issue. But as you communicate more, people get more agitated. They feel like, tell me something. Tell me something. So you look for something. You kind of go find some information, get some inclination as to how will you come out of this, right? And when you communicate things that rely on other people, the burden of communication is on you. And when something goes wrong, everybody's like, no, that's not what you said. That's not how you said it was going to happen. But I'll just say that the real point here is that transparency and communication and ensuring that being honest at every single stage, whether it was with our customers, with our team members, and just maybe with our partners, was also very, very helpful. The last point I'll make would be around just really, really understanding that, this is something that has happened. You have to accept it. Yeah. There's no amount of denial that can take you out of it as the case is. And I'll say perhaps that's how we handle the moments at the time. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to ask just a very quick follow-up question. During that period, who did you have to lean onto? Because I imagine, again, you're going through something you don't understand, and you're probably going through something a lot of people around you don't understand. Who did you lean on? How did you manage your employees? I imagine there were lots of questions, people not sure, like, what's the future of this organization? How did you handle all those things? And then what was your support system like?
I have a partner, so I think that burden is shared. So I could relate with, I think it was Tayo, I'm not sure, I was saying that earlier. I have a partner, so I'm never really alone. Shendi Olabayo, we're pretty much always in this together. So we kind of like was just making fun of ourselves. Like, you know, like you feel like, man, you're doing things and all of a sudden you don't even know what you need to do. So it was, first of all, like, I would say lean on each other I would say that was a very good thing for me as a person. My wife is a psychotherapist, so I think I have a bit of more tools as a human being in terms of like going over difficulty, getting over difficulty. So she was also a really big person for me at the time. She offered me perhaps all the tools I needed really in terms of like, you know, how to wake up in the day, how to think about this, how to not place the burden on the self and just focus on the problem. The team as well, the team in the company. And one important thing I also learned is that when there's difficulty, you don't isolate people. A lot of times when there's a lot of difficulty, you want to reduce your interactions, not because you don't even want to interact, but you don't have immediate answers, all right? So I'd say the team as well was a very good thing I leaned on. Self-care. So I got into doing things that makes me forget about everything. Like when I'm playing tennis, I don't even remember that there's a license issue as a case. So I kind of like got into a couple of new habits that made me at different times disconnect from the reality. You know, stay delusional for whatever that moment of self-care was for me as a person. So I'll say I also leaned heavily on that. And the community, a number of people, because I would say perhaps the most daunting side of all of this is that all of our bank accounts were placed on PND. So you have a license problem and you have no money. And you know, I'm not sure I have so many friends as a human being. So I'm like, wow, where do I begin this from as a case? But I think a number of people really came true for us. So people within the ecosystem. So I'll say people within the ecosystem, the team, my partner and my wife were like real things that I leaned on at the time. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah. Thanks. Peter, now, okay, so you're leaving Twiga. How do you mentally readjust to the reality that this company that I founded is sort of slipping out of my fingers, and then you now have to tell yourself, all right, I need to start afresh. What are some of the things you did and the steps you took to reestablish yourself, and what are some lessons that you're taking from Twiga into Selu?
So thanks a lot for that. So I think one of the biggest challenges is when you're running a business and the business is doing well, you get conditioned to good PR. So everything you say is positive, it runs well with the media, and that more or less reinforces a lot in terms of how you see the world. And I remember when I started having the negative PR, because now you become the face of the problem. The same way you are the face of success, now you're the face of a problem. And I remember one time I woke up and I was a headline. I had my mugshot in the front of a business newspaper. And it wasn't a good story. And I was asking myself, how do I even get out of bed and face the world? And very soon, and actually, just on a side note, I went and I talked to the journalist who did the story and asked him, what joy do you get in publishing some of this information? Some of it is not factual. And he just looked at me and he told me that, you know what? You have more clicks on your link than our front page in the newspaper. So I'm not going to walk away from that right now. So that meant that, I still had a lot more negative PR coming along. And during that time, you can imagine now the noise that it is creating, the credibility is eroding. I had built my reputation over a 20-year period. And in 6 months, some of these young journalists who had nothing to lose had a huge chunk of it go away or just disappear into thin air. And you can imagine what that does into your ability of fundraising, what that does into your ability of attracting new talent, what that does in terms of your ability to even talk about what it is that you're doing in a credible way. So a lot was taken away in a very, very short span of time. And one of the things that I knew is that, investors are true to a few things. One is around return, And two, the size of the opportunity that you put together. It doesn't matter your context. If you're able to present those two things, then that creates some redemption with a certain cohort of investors. So as I was building Selu, one of the things I focused is I took then my resources and I invested in this business. And one of the key things I focused on was, how do you then create a very compelling business model? How do you show the world that you can actually farm? And I'll give you an example. You know, in the area that we're doing maize farming, so the farm that we're running is about 3 times the size of Manhattan in terms of the size of the area of the land. And you can imagine now putting together infrastructure and starting to do farming. It's a very dry area. And a lot of people were not even convinced that you can actually grow food commercially in such a dry environment. And by doing that, we took a huge risk. And again, it paid off because we got yields that are as high as some of the highlands where you have most of these products being grown. So we took a lot of risks, but they were very, very calculated. But it was facing one thing. Investors look at risk. And all we were focused on is, how do you reduce that risk? How do you convince somebody to part with their check? And where we've gotten right now is that we've gotten a lot of the big global players in the agricultural sector. We're working with the largest seed company in the world. We're working with a big farm management business. But the key thing is that to get to that point, it meant that you had to be very focused, and then you have to drown the noise that is around you. Because if you let that noise get to you, the level of depression and so many other things that will come after you is quite significant. And you've seen that there's a lot of people who are not able to transition from one opportunity to the next. And I think that level of focus for me was what really, really helped. And sorry, one other thing is, especially as an entrepreneur, have a balanced life. Don't bet everything on your company. Ensure that you have a balanced life as far as your family goes. Have a balanced life as far as your friends go. And also have a balanced life in terms of spirituality, whatever that means for you. And by having these things, it ensures that when one area is not working, you have 3 that are working that you can then leverage on. Otherwise, the risk of losing your mind is very, very high.
All right, thank you very much. I want to talk about pressure and dealing with pressure, coming out of pressure. And just for the audience, in a few minutes, we're going to open it up for you. So if you have any questions for either of them, just get ready in 7 or so minutes. Let's talk about pressure. How do you handle the pressure of change? How do you handle the pressure of, dealing with failure and coming out of it and making sure that some of the things that happened in the past do not happen again? Yomi, you can go first.
Pressure. I think that the kind of pressure you experience from a very daunting difficulties, perhaps maybe not comparable to everyday pressure as the case is. But how do you kind of undo pressure? How do you deal with difficulty as a person? I think first is mostly about perspective, maintaining the right perspective. The perspective for me would be that a lot of times we personalize things. We want to, so for example, something hasn't gone the way we want it to go, and we've all of a sudden it's now about us, about who you are as a person. But in reality, that is just that thing. So being able to separate yourself completely from what you're doing, who you are and what you're doing, being able to effectively separate that person from what you're doing, I think is a big way to kind of deal with pressure. So if something was intense, that was what was intense. It didn't mean that you as a person needed to be going through an intensity. So I'll say first is about perspective. The second would be about just realizing that you're in the market. The market itself is a dynamic place. And if you're in a dynamic place, you need to maintain a dynamic mindset to that dynamic place as the case is. So having a mindset of adaptability, knowing that things can happen in the market, and when things happen in the market, you need to be fluid enough to be flexible to respond to change. So I say staying adaptable, maintain the right perspective and staying adaptable. Lastly, I would say as well, making sure you have an healthy life. I want to really buttress what Peter has said. And to a large extent, if you are in this environment where perhaps the burden of success or the burden of performance or outcomes, whatever name you want to call it, is so extended. You have such a huge amount of people who are depending on you to succeed. So a lot of times, it's not even really about you, it's about what is at stake. So it's very important to ensure that you have an healthy lifestyle that ensures you can give yourself to different things. There are times where, during this period, for example, what I'm deriving joy from is mostly like doing assignments with my daughter, and that time feels like a successful moment for me as a person. So I'll just say like maintaining the right perspective, staying adaptable, and just really making sure that you have a balanced and healthy life. Yeah.
Thank you. And Peter, please.
I think in my case, one thing that helps me deal with pressure is, in life, you cannot choose what happens to you, but you have a choice in terms of how you react to it. And I realized that I did not have power on anything that happens to me, but I have a lot of power in terms of how I react. And that really helped me start dealing with a lot of its challenges. When something negative happens, then you need to find it in you to start seeing the positive elements in what it is that is happening, and how do I leverage some of those points. When I look at where we are today in the business, it's been a journey. I've gotten a few people who've believed in me throughout this journey, but having that mindset is what has helped me carry through to a point where now I'm having investors back on the table. We're now closing again on this venture, and to get to that point, it means that there's something significant that you have to shift in terms of how you see the world and how you actually react to how the world what the world puts on your feet.
Okay, this is a question for both of you. What is the most surprising thing? So out of all this, when everything started, I know Yomi, you've talked about how you found out. I'm still very shocked that you found out about your own license revocation on the news. But apart from that, what were some of the most surprising things that you had to deal with that just left you shocked? Like is this really, really happening? What are some of those things?
I think the strength of people first.
Okay.
People are incredibly strong. And it's really amazing when a problem happens, you kind of like realize that even a person you thought perhaps didn't have the bandwidth. I mean, let me speak specifically. There was this young girl. I think she was in Ekiti or so. She had money in the bank, and she'll call me. I gave her my number at some point. She'll call me and she'll tell me, "Oh, I need this money, as the case is, and I need to get this money to do something." And as I walked through the process of trying to resolve, perhaps getting my own personal money to her, just making sure she can continue to do what she's doing, she would say, "Oh no, I shouldn't worry," that she's willing to wait through the process. And the more I tried to find out about who she was, what I could tell was, it wasn't a case of that she was okay or she could deal with that problem herself. She was very empathetic towards our situation. So like, "Oh, I've been banking on you guys for a long time. I really like the service," and it just kind of like, and many experiences, a number of experiences are similar to that as well. Just shows you the strength that people have to withstand pain. And sometimes, sometimes it's the best thing to do is to give up. Yeah. But before you do so, kind of like checking yourself. You have something inside of you that literally can withstand, difficulty. I'll say the strength of people. What was surprising to me was also the response of the regulator, because after learning about, this happened in the newspaper, like, I in my mind, I'm like, "Oh, this is an adversary," literally. Like, why do you do this? Create so much chaos. But I would say throughout that journey, they've become a partner of progress. They were so willing to resolve the issue. They wanted to make sure we could perhaps, stem the issues with our customers. I was very surprised. I was expecting, it was going to be an add-on, or you guys have, broken some rules, because it was really unclear to us for a very long time why this happened. Perhaps a number of it's still unclear, but it's resolved now, so that's beyond. But I would say the reaction, the behavior of the regulator was very, very encouraging, and I think the central bank, as an agency, as an institution, won a lot of credit points with me as a person during that period. I think maybe those two things, apart from obviously just learning in the newspaper that our license is over. Yeah, thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Peter, please go ahead.
I think in my case, one thing that I learned through this whole process, and for me was quite surprising, is in this digital age, when information travels at very, very rapid speeds, it is quite surprising that people's perceptions of you and your credibility can shift overnight from something that you have worked on and built over an extended period of time to having all of it shift in a twink of an eye. And one of the things I've had to learn through this is that I've had to work very, very diligently to rebuild over close to 2 years what took a very short span of time to just get me back to on track, especially with things like fundraising and putting together teams. So one thing I would say is that even when things are going well, it's to be very thoughtful about what type of PR am I putting out there. Is this going to be PR that will then be fodder for me later? Or am I building my PR in a way that allows me to have setbacks in future and appear human? Because if you do not appear human or people are not able to relate with you, then of course there's a lot of intrigue and entertainment when one is going through some of his challenges. So I think for me, that was a very, very surprising thing. I've learned a lot from it, and I'm very, very thoughtful about what I put out there and what I keep.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I have 2 more questions for both of you. This one is around changing the narrative, because that's why we are having this conversation. People often think of failure as something to avoid, but most times it is inevitable. You go through phases like this. How do we then, as an ecosystem, right, as a business ecosystem across the continent, change the narratives around failure? How can we make it more comfortable for entrepreneurs and just people that we've placed on pedestals to talk about these things so that we can all learn collectively? Peter, you can go first.
So I would say that failure is part of a journey. It's not a destination. So, and if we continue viewing failure as a destination, we will never then take away the stigma from it. So, and that's the way I look at it, because, and I was reading an interesting article, and many of you know Michael Jordan, and in 300 games, he missed 9,000 shots. And in 26 of those games, the ball was passed on to him, and he was expected to make the final shot that was a winning shot, which he did not make. But today, we still look back at Michael Jordan as the greatest player that ever lived on the basketball court. But the key thing is that for him, he was able to wake up the next day and perform at the similar level to what he did yesterday. And I think that's where we need to get to as entrepreneurs. You will have a setback today, and it's okay. You know, sometimes when your idea meets the real world, things will not work out as planned, and it's fine. And what you need to do is wake up tomorrow and try again. And if something did not work yesterday, change it. And do not be beholden to holding on to something that doesn't work. And that level of dynamism is what creates success. I know there's many successful entrepreneurs sitting here. Their journeys were not smooth. There's days that they had were good days, and there's days that were bad days. But what happens is that we've just learned to celebrate the good days. And it is important for us to also see these are the bad days. And how do I then manage myself through some of its challenges? And the more we're able to do that, I think the more resilient we will become as an ecosystem.
Yomi?
I think it's Sigmund Freud that says that failure is part of everyday life. And if you drop a plate in the kitchen, you pretty much just failed in holding that plate as a case. I think we need to normalize failure for a number of reasons. I think failure is literally packed with lessons. If you think about success on its own, it's often an achievement of an outcome. And when you succeed, you learn how to succeed, at least. Like, you know, oh, this is a way to get things done. But failure gives you an extension of knowledge. It basically allows you to learn what hasn't worked, what works. And perhaps maybe the meaning of success itself needs to include just being able to learn a lot of lessons, the growth, the character you build as a person going through failure. I think just normalizing it as another activity within the ecosystem will be something that will encourage a lot of people to try things, to share more. So I'll say the normalization of failure will really go a long way. Also, I mean, when failure happens, you know, and your person, I mean, I could relate to what Peter was saying about your perception changes so quickly. You all of a sudden you kind of like you'll have used up all of your capital just because you just went through a damning event. So I think it's very important for the ecosystem itself to really, I guess, be open-minded to ensure to kind of like know that the journey of life is literally a long-lasting one, and failure is just a setback on that journey. So normalize failure, and embrace things when they happen, as the case is. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that perspective. And so the thing about perception and how quickly it changes, I think a lot of that also has to do with the journalists who cover the business ecosystem, right? Because I mean, as someone who I've spent the last 10 years or so doing journalism, I think it is important for us to not report stories, for reporters to not talk about stories and entrepreneurs from a place of almost like glee or schadenfreude, right? It has to be more constructive. It has to be from a place of, okay, this is what happened, these are the lessons. I mean, you don't have to be very explicit like that way, but it has to be more constructive, because I think when we approach these stories that way, in that manner, it's going to encourage more people to be open and less cagey with things that they should not even be hiding at all. So thank you both very much for that. Do you have any questions from the audience, please? Any questions? Please raise your hands. Okay, that's one. Anyone else?
Can they please pass the mic over to them?
Okay.
There's a question from the gentleman at the back.
So if you have a question, your name, your question, and to whom your question is directed.
There's room for just 2 questions because of our time.
Hello. Hi. My question is directed mainly to, the panelists. You mentioned something about when you engage with failure, right? The ability to separate yourself from what has happened to you, right? But then as an entrepreneur, like for Yomi now, he has been an entrepreneur, I think, all his life. How do you separate yourself from something that is basically the embodiment of all your life's work? My name is Adeleke.
Hi, Emmanuel.
Hi.
I think it's easy said than done. Let me start from there. I think it's easy said than done. When something happens to you, I mean, there are a couple of things that go on inside of you that pretty much get you in this emotional state of like, oh, why is this happening to me? Why is it about me, as the case is? But I think over time, what you will eventually realize is that you're not gonna have a good day every day. It's not gonna be a good day every day or a good month every month, right? So if something is never gonna change, if you will have to have something to solve, a problem to address, a difficulty to get past, why would you let something that you can't necessarily control take control of yourself, of your life, right? I think coming to that reality, perhaps is the beginning journey of, just attempting to separate yourself from what has happened to you. It doesn't mean people will separate you. I mean, and I don't think that's something you should worry too much about. People wouldn't separate you from what has happened to you. They will try to define you in that manner, but it's not. It's really your responsibility to understand that if you can't change something, I think the next step to what you can change is to start accepting it and start figuring out how do you deal with it better. Thank you, Manuel. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
All right. We have a question from here, please.
Hi, Yomi. Good to see you again. I mean, I really enjoy listening to you, and I always say that I don't want to face your challenges, but I want your success. I heard you talk about like how you are enjoying like doing assignments with your daughter and stuff like that, and I can relate. But the reality is that if we want to build some of the kind of businesses that we've seen today, it still takes a lot of blood, sweat, tears, and grinding. So how do you sort of find that balance between, at this stage of your life, trying to enjoy some of the things that you consider, to matter more, and still building something great? Because I feel like the beauty of the end of the story will be when we still build something that we're all proud of and that we can pay forward. My name is John. Oh, amen.
All right. So I think it's Because you want to have more balance, does that mean that does not mean you're taking away intensity? The intensity has to be there. We're in a difficult environment. If you just look at the African continent, if you're starting a business in Africa vis-a-vis somebody starting it in Europe, here in Europe, you basically have to focus on your intellectual property with the problem that you're trying to solve. In Africa, you have to then focus on the IP that you need to build, but you're also responsible of creating an enabling environment for you to thrive, because that enabling environment in most instances does not exist. So the reality is that you have to still have the grind, you still have to have the passion, but the most important thing is that it's to have the balance. To then say that, yes, I can have 13, 14-hour days, but what am I being deliberate about how I'm also thinking about family, about how I'm thinking about friends? Because if you become a recluse and all you're focused on is your business, then everything that doesn't happen well in the business then impacts you disproportionately as an individual. Is to then say that there will always be disappointments, but let's strive to have more balance in terms of how we look. But that should not compromise the intensity.
Okay, let me add something to that, just to buttress what Peter said. I think it's really about time utilization, because there's practically no way as a human being, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, that you can spend all of your time on your business. So if you're being honest with yourself first, and you diagnose your life, you're not spending 100% of your time, all the time on your business. However, there are certain things you need to spend time with so you can spend the best of time with your business. And that's really what I think I've understood balance to now mean. So it's almost like, I need to do this so I can do this well. This business is really important for me. I need to be able to maintain intensity. So when I get my time off it and I sometimes zone out of it, or I'm spending time with other things that are really important to me, it means that when I'm back to the business, I can focus. I'm generally a scattered mind. I have some ADHD conditions. So I need to primarily figure out how I can concentrate on something for 2-3 hours. Like, can I sit on my desk and not move to another browser or go to my phone? And doing those things off work has helped me mostly sharpen my focus. And also honesty with myself that I'm actually not doing time all the time with my work anyway. So I better spend that other time that I'm not doing my work on something that is really important to me and makes me even better at work, as the case is. So I would even say I'm doing all of that for work as much as I'm doing it for my daughter, as the case is.
All right, thank you both so much. Please, let's put hands together for Peter and Yomi, please. Thanks. Thank you very much. Thanks. And I hope you enjoyed the session and learned a few things from it.